Hi YouTube, my name is Thane and welcome to my channel. I'm gonna make a pretty bold statement right now and say that I love Paper Mario Color Splash. I do. This game is still seeing a ton of debate in its likability though, so today I will be trying to address negative opinions of those unconvinced of the game's quality. I will have a respectable and open mind, of course. As an introduction, I must say that the internet was so eager to hate this game on pre-release, but why wouldn't they be? After the massive step backwards that was Sticker Star, a low-key reveal of this new game didn't seem to address any of the issues of the old. This was to be a direct sequel in presentation and gameplay. Fans were scared more than anything else that the series would never go back to the way it used to be. Controversy was at an all-time high, and whether you'd given up completely or held on to that last bit of hope that Sticker Star's errors would be fixed, it was not a very good time to be a Paper Mario fan. Despite all of this though, I've actually really been looking forward to playing Color Splash for myself. I was excited to see how aspects like the writing would stand in its own merit. Thankfully, I feel my splurge of $60 was very well spent, and I'm going to tell you all why right now. Using the Color Splash case, a generic Toad, Mr. Miyamoto, the Intelligent Systems logo, and Curtsy, I've successfully summoned the collective complaints of the series veterans. Sifting through these leads to the most intimidating fan response, which is, you guessed it, the battle system. Looking at any online thread for Color Splash will reveal a universal disinterest in this new direction. And while I agree the first two games have my favorite combat by far, I don't think Color Splash's approach is that poor at all. At least not nearly as bad as some people may say online. The battle system itself is turn-based, and that may sound like the first two games, but it's its own thing entirely. It allows for a set number of cards, which grows over time, to be played once per attack, and it's all very basic. There's jump and hammer abilities with different strengths, mushrooms of varying sizes that refill your health, specialty offensive cards, and defensive boosts like the return of the frog suit. While I do agree with the complaints of Sticker Star's purposeless battles and non-conventional puzzle solving, Color Splash just about fixed every problem I had. Sure, I often found myself avoiding enemies not unique to me when I had the chance, but honestly I do that with every turn-based game similar unless I absolutely need to grind. The battles aren't without purpose. In addition to coins, cards, and paint, the player is also rewarded hammer scraps of different sizes which act as a sort of XP system, in which your paint storage is upgraded. I'll admit I didn't like this better than the traditional level up screen, with a selection of perks to choose from, but it does give players a benefit from battle that really does feel like progress, something its predecessor lacked entirely. Did I really need the paint upgrades? That's debatable since refills are plentiful and the 1-up card does give a complete replenishment, but there were a few circumstances in which I ran out and needed to hunt for more. It's not required to beat the game, but it does make the process a bit easier, which is always welcome. I should also mention that the creator of the Bit Block did a playthrough of the game, and he avoided collecting these hammer scraps completely, or at least to the best of his ability. And he still reported that the game was too easy, which I respect. That's a fair opinion, but I still think that it is an immense improvement from Sticker Star, which he likes, and that kind of contrasts the whole dislike for this new game. I think the hammer scraps are a great addition, and it can't hurt. This is an improvement from Sticker Star. This is better. It's some progression, and that's what I need from an RPG. Moving on, battling in the overworld was fairly average. I'll agree with that, but that's one aspect I can't say about the boss fights. Even though Mario is paired up against just the Koopalings again for each chapter ending, their personalities really shone through this time, and I genuinely looked forward to each interaction with them. The Koopalings were given more distinguishable dialogue than ever, and each background area fought in was a pleasure to experience. These bosses all have their own awesome battle themes that even distort uniquely when Mario is low on health. Talk about attention to detail. I really looked forward to these fights subjectively, but how did they play mechanically? Unlike Sticker Star, Thane cards not only just significantly weaken the boss, they're downright required for victory. And this isn't a good thing in itself, but it never even remotely became a problem, because in this game the puzzles are, for the most part, much more intuitive. These puzzle bosses aren't watered down to trial and error this time either, as the player can receive an obvious hint and even check back before the level to see if they have everything needed by this handy dumpster toad. This eliminates any frustration as the bosses all follow the exact same formula. Whittle them down to about half of their HP, and they'll bring out a secret weapon untouchable to anything but the solution. Use the required Thing card and leave them vulnerable once again for punishment by Mario. This setup works well because it really is just a traditional boss fight once the player has the Koopaling's weakness. They do put up a challenge, making for a win that actually feels earned. Koopalings are the only battles that function this way though in game, so even if you're still not convinced, there's plenty of other mid-boss fights that play out normally. Kamek is one of those bosses, and while his fight is a source of complaints, it's really the interventions and random battles that drive people nuts. Though this wasn't an issue for me, I do recognize his broken mechanics, so I feel it should be investigated for the sake of my argument. This whole infamous gimmick works similarly to Sticker Star, in that he'll change your playing cards with a spell, but unlike simply changing them all to fairly useless sandals, a variety of different things can happen in Color Splash. Here's a case I've made for each one I've experienced. Number 1. Kamek makes Mario's cards flip face down so the player can no longer see them, in an attempt to cause accidental use and waste higher tiered cards than necessary. This also works per turn to waste ineffective attacks, or puts Mario at risk for prolonging battle with underpowered cards. While this can catch the player off guard the very first time it happens, I knew to experience this during later encounters, and memorized whatever I could see on screen as they're flipped exactly in place right after. If the cards were shuffled, I could see this being a much greater issue, but I found the magic spell very easy to work around. Number 2. Similarly, Kamek can turn all of Mario's cards into one type, requiring memorization again, though tougher this time because more is required if he transforms strong cards to weaker ones. I'm aware of the infamous YouTube video documenting a case in which Kamek intervened before a battle between Mario and one lone swoop, transforming all of his cards to Eek Hammers. The player had no choice than to lose the battle as the hammers can't reach the target, made even worse considering all 99 of them had to be used and wasted. Obviously this is unfair, it really is. However, the chances of this happening are incredibly low and clearly a developer oversight, something that can be patched in an update if it really becomes that much of an issue. This can happen in other similar situations, like if Kamek transforms all cards to jump attacks during a fight with a spiked enemy. But it shouldn't be worried about because all of those low chances. Losing is also very annoying but not game breaking. The result could have been death, and at the very least this doesn't make for any lost progress, unless you carry around rare cards with you, which I don't. Besides the point, there's 3 key aspects to remember here. Thing cards in general can be replenished easily, the player will have plenty of coins to buy whatever card is lost, and enemy cards can always be obtained again. Number 3. Kamek takes all but 5 of Mario's cards. Every time this happened, I was given a fair and diverse range of attacks, rendering quick solutions to win the battle. Perhaps this was my playstyle, but I always found that maintaining a variety of attacks was easy, because of the amount of cards that can be found in the overworld. It's probably possible for Kamek to take all but 5 ineffective cards, similar to the above problem, but again, this is very unlikely and hopefully won't be a problem if a diverse set of cards is kept. So, out of the 3 possible encounters I've mentioned, 2 of them have a low chance of leading to a potential problem, and the chance of it even being a problem is very low in itself. From this standpoint, the average player will never have difficulties, paired with the fact that this could very well be patched, rendering the Kamek point nitpicking in my opinion. This is made especially true if it hasn't happened to the person making the argument. A second counter-argument that could be made though is even after Kamek's admitted defeat and supposed demise, he cheats death, continuing to delve curses as if nothing's changed. This is probably also an oversight, and I do love continuity, so it's an unfortunate aspect, but one I honestly didn't even think about when playing. Now that I am thinking about it though, my headcanon is that this is another trick faking his death to torment the mustache hero in the trek towards Bowser. Regardless of reasoning, the actual boss battle between Kamek is very fun. You can execute every curse as mentioned above and then some, whittling Mario down to shrimp size, weakening his cards, and even taking all of them away so a battle spin is required. If this fight was the only exposure to Kamek's magic, I feel players would be much more accepting, but then again the random encounters did prepare me for the fight, and though I recognize the faults, I never really minded them anyway. So, what about the final battle? What each one preceding it was leading up to, and the last one to be ingrained in the memories of fans? Well, I have a lot to say about it, so let's get a couple of totally important things out of the way first. No, you can't use Koopaling cards in this battle. They'll run away like standard enemies. I was hoping for some funny dialogue between his traitor minion and the boss, but no. Secondly, on a less disappointing note, the player will be rewarded with the best enemy card in the game during the ending cutscenes. It's Black Bowser's castle after Huey squeezes the harmful paint from it, and can be used in battle to summon the behemoth structure from the skies. The architecture falls and decimates any enemy, satisfying my fear of losing to this absolutely overpowered small Goomba. Much more gratifying though is that it can actually be used if a player fights Bowser a second time, inside the very castle Mario summons. So, a carbon copy of this battle stage Bowser is fighting and crushes Bowser. It's not an instant kill though, and means nothing if Bowser's next attack isn't blocked, but it inflicts a lot of damage that speeds up the fight if used appropriately. It's really silly, and I love that this is possible in game. With those super important features out of the way, let's discuss the final fight itself. I really like the role of Bowser was given in this game. The build-up is fantastic. Yes, I could do without another Peach abduction, it's not needed, and away with the Toad that points it out. But if no risks are going to be taken with another big bad character taking the throne, I'm glad the approach still felt different with another looming presence than Bowser. This time, Bowser's personality is shown to be rather bumbling like the persona given in Super. Through gradual flashbacks explaining what exactly happened, we see the Koopa King's not even trying to be evil at all. His creating of the black paint was a complete accident. He just wanted a rainbow shell. Can you blame him? This dangerous mixture now acting as a host to take over Mario's innocent rival. In fact, when Huey absorbs all of the parasitic paint, Bowser is left helpless and delivered an unnecessary final blow before he even gets the chance to figure out what's happening. This is all clever, but it doesn't get more in depth than that, as Peach just comments, "I hope they've learned their lesson this time." However, I still think it's great that there's an ulterior motive behind the actions of the villain, besides stereotypical glory or a complete lack of one at all. With this said though, how does the actual fight play out to conclude my battling spiel? Well, it's tough, and it's supposed to be. For those that don't like the thing cards, you'll be happy to learn that none are required here. It's a good old Mario against Bowser fight with a slightly frustrating mechanic, involving first the need to eliminate the field of enemies that can replenish his paint, and then a second phase in which Huey must absorb any of the gunk Mario hits off Bowser and uses for a counterattack. This part is pretty difficult because any missed defense commands allows Bowser to absorb back all the paint the player knocks off of him. It's not unfair in any way though, and each time I missed an action command, I knew it was my own fault. I really can't say anything negative about the design because I feel it's fine. It works for everything I was anticipating. It's nerve-wracking working to stop the threat before Huey breaks from the force of the attacks, and the payoff for defeating him is great. Not to mention the music, which seamlessly transitions from a heart-pounding ballad to a haunted melody. Alright, well with that I think I've finished my proposal for thinking differently about the fights of Color Splash. But before I leave, let's do a little something fun. I wanted to share my least favorite and favorite parts of the game. To start with my least favorite, this one acts more like a minigame, but I'll count it here as it uses cards and functions similarly to how a standard battle would. The unfortunate fights I'm referring to is any of the 8 challenges against the Rock Paper Wizard, hailing from the random number generated Rochambeau temples. Thankfully, he's optional to defeat and doesn't hurt the overall experience too much. But this wizard is actually my one and only real complaint with this game, and why I felt it necessary to discuss here. The competitor can only be conquered with sheer luck, which isn't the case with more than half of the opponents faced before an encounter with him. I really don't like the choose a card and hope for the best aspect, which is what all of these Rochambeau temples end with when competing with the wizard. With this said, I do love the reveal of the character once the 8 temples are cleared though, somewhat making the monotony of each worth it. Maybe. And now for the most fun fight. My favorite boss in this game was Wendy O. Koopa in the Fortune Island stage of the Big Purple Paint Star quests. Her little crush on Mario is kinda cute and reminds me of how every girl in Thousand Year Door is wooed by his mustache or something. Not to mention the actual battle being very engaging. It requires the player to keep tabs on Wendy's rhythm during attacks, to recite when it comes time to defend with action commands. Tapping along with the background music is always riveting, and a great end to this unique set of levels. To conclude, I think anyone feeling this game is worth any less than its retail price should try and reconsider. I understand the complaints, I really do, as most of them are valid. All I'm hoping to do in this video is suggest a more open-minded way of interpreting the game, for those of you in the mix to determine for yourselves how this game fares in impact. I feel that no matter what angle one criticizes this game for, it's hard to deny that there's room for more opinions on the matter. Its aspects to like about Color Splash are just as frequent as any annoyances one would experience. I implore you all to dismiss popular judgment and form a unique opinion of your own, whether it be hate, love, or just plain okay. This has been my defending of Color Splash's battle system. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember, My opinion is just as valid as yours. I'll see you next time.
Kamek,